Thank you, Madam Chair. The FAA faces enormous challenges. It must modernize our airspace while safely integrating new entrants like drones. It is trying to keep its reputation as the gold standard for aviation safety while dealing with far too many close calls and operating an outdated air traffic control system that must safely move roughly 2 million passengers a day. To meet its mission, the FAA needs a Senate-confirmed leader with decades of experience in aviation to make certain that the flying public is safe, the agency's primary obligation. This obligation is so important that Congress mandated that the FAA administrator must, quote, have experience in a field directly related to aviation. The nominee before us, Phil Washington, had a long and honorable career in the military, but he does not have any experience in aviation safety. This, quite simply, is a position he is not qualified for. I'm disappointed that the administration has chosen to treat a critical safety position, a position keeping our families safe, they've chosen to treat it as a patronage job. As a result of the White House playing politics with the flying public safety, the FAA has lacked a Senate-confirmed leader for a year now. I expect we'll hear some members of this committee gloss over Mr. Washington's lack of aviation and aviation safety experience by saying he has a record of strong management of transit agencies. He understands buses, and isn't that good enough for planes? But his record demonstrates the opposite. The Democrat city transit agencies he's run have been beset by mismanagement and wasteful spending. In 2019, CBS News reported Mr. Washington tried to add a $200,000 sauna to the LA Metro's employee gym after being presented with a more taxpayer-friendly $50,000 version. He proposed this lavish spending as city buses, quote, broke down and caught fire due to lack of money. The New York Times reported that a Denver rail project overseen by Mr. Washington ran up a $2 billion plus deficit and had become over 30 years behind schedule. Just last month, Mr. Washington and other Denver officials spent more than $100,000 on a junket to Africa to drum up support to Denver's airport. Government waste and delayed over-budget projects are things we want to change at the FAA, not continue. I'm also afraid that Mr. Washington's record suggests that he'd focus on virtue signaling at a time when the FAA needs to be laser-focused on aviation safety and modernization. As LA Metro CEO, he said, quote, everything we do in terms of mobility, we look through the lens of equity. At the Denver airport, he's spending millions of dollars to build a special, quote, hall of equity and change the contract bidding process to place a heavier emphasis on so-called equity and so-called social cultural merits. Safety, not political posturing, needs to be paramount at the FAA. I also have serious concerns regarding outstanding allegations of misconduct going back to Mr. Washington's time at LA Metro. He was named in multiple search warrants in an ongoing criminal public corruption investigation and was the subject of multiple whistleblower complaints. One whistleblower who exposed details of a politically connected contracting scheme claims to have been retaliated against by Mr. Washington. After Mr. Washington went to Denver, LA Metro settled the claims for more than $500,000. And just last month, Mr. Washington was named in a discrimination and retaliation lawsuit filed by a former Denver airport employee. Mr. Washington failed to notify this committee of the lawsuit, one of dozens of omissions in his questionnaire, suggesting that he has been less than fully transparent and raising concerns about how he'll collaborate with us as we work to reauthorize the FAA. Finally, Mr. Washington, as a retired member of the military, needs a waiver from both the House and the Senate to be eligible to serve, since federal law explicitly requires that the FAA administrator be a civilian, and retired members of the military do not, under the statute, qualify as civilians. On 5 occasions, Congress has passed legislative waivers so that retired military personnel could serve at the FAA. We would do the same for Mr. Washington if his record merited it, if he had experience in aviation safety. But it doesn't, and if Senate Democrats force this nomination through without a waiver, a legal cloud will hang over every single FAA action. Let me close with a quote. Quote, "I have said that it is very important that in this day and age, when it comes to aviation, safety must always be our top priority. We've considered the nomination, the nominee's record, an ongoing case of whistleblower retaliation, and given all of that, it is clear to me that he is not the right person for the safety culture that we need today at the FAA." Those were the words spoken about a former FAA nominee by the chairwoman of this committee in 2019, about Steve Dixon, who had 40 years of aviation experience. Mr. Washington is not the right nominee for this position.